You two now can confirm that how many times a day would you say you correct my pronunciation?
11 billion.
Okay. All right. So when I got to do Ayman Mohyeldin's show on MSNBC Saturday night, his producers in my ear did say, "Stephanie, it's Ayman." I don't know what I was saying. I was nervous. It was my first time. He's very handsome and romantic and a fantastic journalist, and I love his show. Good morning, Ayman Mohyeldin.
Good morning. Good morning. It's good to be with you.
That was a super fun panel. That was really great.
I really enjoyed it. I think a lot of people enjoyed it as well. It was the first time I think I've spoken to you on TV. So you definitely brought a lot of fun, I should say.
Well, let me just say, I have been dying to talk to you about your podcast actually for a while. Travis can tell you, before I went on your show, I just said this, because I'm sure all of these latest, news bombshells as a journalist about January 6th, I'm sure you're doing the same thing we are, keeping up with all this morning. Yeah. But I mean, the foot soldiers, that piece of it on January 6th and your personal connection to it, I just think is fascinating. So we've all seen even if you haven't heard the podcast, if you've seen the ads on MSNBC, Roseanne Boylan hated politics. She was shy. She rarely left her home in Georgia, but then her family got a shocking call. Roseanne had died at the Capitol on January 6th in the middle of a crowd trying to force their way past a police line. From the depths of their grief, the Boylans vowed to figure out what happened to Roseanne. Her brother-in-law, Justin Cave, reached out to an old high school friend he hoped could help, MSNBC journalist Ayman Mohyeldin. The quest for truth takes Ayman back to his hometown of Kennesaw. Am I pronouncing that right?
Kennesaw.
Georgia, where he retraces the last 6 months of Roseanne's life and picks up a trail that leads to childhood haunts, missing boyfriends, down shadowy internet rabbit holes, American Radical, the 5-part series. Ayman, so glad you're able to talk about this. So you didn't know her, but you knew Justin. So tell us how this all...
Yeah, so I my parents moved from the Middle East to, out of all places, Kennesaw, Georgia, in the early 90s. So that's where we settled when they immigrated to the U.S. And I went to high school at North Cobb High School, and I knew Justin Cave. We played soccer together. We were friends, and this was pre-Facebook, pre-social media. And so after high school, we kind of lost touch with each other. And although every time I'd go back, we would either hear about each other from other friends. Justin and I did not speak and were not in touch until Facebook came along and reconnected us on the internet and on social media. So we reconnected, and over the years, we would exchange a message here or two or just kind of follow each other's news. But after January the 6th, I got a message from him, I think on January the 9th, 3 days later, saying his sister-in-law, Roseanne, was one of those who died in the attack on the Capitol 3 days ago. He made a statement, and then he asked if I wanted to hear her story. What really caught my attention, though, was that he used the word radicalization. He said that the family believes that Roseanne was radicalized in under 6 months.
Wow.
And for me, it was just such a jarring word to hear an old friend of mine in high school in Kennesaw, Georgia, use the word radicalization. Keep in mind, I had spent like 15 years overseas in the Middle East. I've covered extremism and radicalism. I've covered ISIS, Al-Qaeda, terrorism, Europe, all that. So, and I'm very familiar with the word, but to hear it in the context of January the 6th and a friend of mine in high school was quite eye-opening. And so I immediately replied to him and spoke to him, and that's how the story began.
Well, yeah, and the way you put it here, it examines the causes for Boylan's transformation from politically disengaged to someone who died for Donald Trump.
Wow.
I mean, how tragic is that? And you talk about, you just said it, inside of 6 months. They've done these studies, Ayman, about, social media, how people can get radicalized so quickly. I mean, tell us a little bit. It's interesting as a journalist, you talk about it's, Middle East. I mean, terrorism's terrorism, right? And I think you talk in here about how, you talk about she had a hard life, difficult life. She was a victim of physical abuse. She struggled financially. She had some self-esteem issues. You said, I think she was definitely in that category of destitute. She was definitely a victim of disinformation, and she contributed to it because she consumed a lot of misinformation with her beliefs and conspiracy theories and QAnon. And I think it pivoted when we saw the presence of Trump to include him as a demagogue. He was the person who manipulated and exploited the vulnerabilities of people to try to promise them he could fix their societal ills, and the way to do it was to follow him. I mean,
yeah, and you bring up a really good point, because when I started,
I was just quoting you, but
but I mean, it was really good that you focused on that, because that is the central theme of, I think, how she was radicalized, which is like this kind of triangle. It's this nexus of disinformation, destitution, and demagoguery. And when you look at the reason why people get radicalized, it falls in that triangle. This is a young woman who had struggled with personal substance abuse and drugs. She had a physically abusive relationship. She had a difficult time getting her life in order and being able to hold a job and take care of herself. And then she was bombarded with this disinformation of here's what's wrong in society. There's a conspiracy theory of Democrats and Hollywood elite trafficking children for or part of this, satanic worshiping cabal. And so what happens is you are ripe for somebody who comes across as a demagogue to say, follow me. I will cure your ills. I alone can fix it. I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and nobody will care. And you start believing the rhetoric of this man saying, if you come with me to stop this deal, I'll stay in power. I will fight this cabal. I will protect the children. I will save the children. And so you see how her transformation from being a person who was not socially, she was very mindful of going into places with large crowds. She hated going to Walmart. Right. How do you go from not wanting to go to a Walmart to suddenly being part of a rally of thousands of people going up and clashing with the police? How do you go from somebody who's never voted in their life or being political to consuming news 24/7, being online for 14, 15 hours a day, disengaging from your family, and totally going down this rabbit hole? And I think it's the nexus of the three of them is what was so dangerous for the family.
And you were, drawn to this. You saw the headline, "Family of Rioter calls on President Trump to resign or the 25th Amendment to be revoked." So this is the story of so many friends and family in this country, isn't it? Losing loved ones to this cult. And Ayman, I'm just curious, as a journalist, what has happened that we're at this point? It's not like we just don't have one set of facts. There's a big segment of the society, I don't know what to call it. It's just crazy. I mean, I don't know what you do when you're interviewing people that think JFK Jr. is coming back and all this other QAnon stuff and that COVID's not real and the vaccine doesn't work and Trump won the election. I mean, how did we get here and what do we do about it?
So those are two really good questions. And I mean, we can talk about them for hours, and there are probably people who are way more experts at it than I am. But from what I've seen and what I've learned is two things. We have a disinformation pandemic in this country. Mm-hmm. And, what we don't have is responsible citizenship in the context of information. And what I mean by that is, look, you look at some other countries, certainly third world countries, where the media is state controlled. Everybody's getting a certain narrative. And that is confining people to a specific viewpoint. In this country, we have our freedoms, which are amazing. We have First Amendment that protects everything that we can say and see and read and write. But with that now, you have the advent of social media and the internet, which allows everybody to say whatever they want. That's great, but it puts the responsibility on you as a consumer to become more careful in what it is that you're consuming, to try to really verify what is the information that is in front of you, who's putting it out there, why are they putting it out there? Back in the day, you could only choose from one or two news outlets. And what you have now is you have hundreds, whether it's online or TV, cable, radio, podcasts, and you have to be the responsible one in this equation to say, I need to make sure I'm getting this from trusted, verified, and vetted sources. And diversifying them. So we haven't been doing that. And that's why you have millions of people think that JFK Jr. is going to pop up in Dallas to run with Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential race.
Well, I mean, you talk about when you go to interview people, one of them said, oh, well, you're on MSNBC. But right away, that's like saying, oh, you're fake news, right? I mean, it's, but here's the thing. There's not two sets of facts. It works. Joe Biden won the election. JFK Jr.'s dead. I mean, it's just, there are like... I mean, it's interesting that, when people say Rachel Maddow's not the same as Sean Hannity. I mean, when people, say, oh, well, that's your opinion. This is my opinion. Some things are not opinion. And I don't know how we get back to that.
Well, I'm not sure that we will get back to that. I hate to say that. What we have to get to is we have to get to a baseline consensus that there is a reality out there, and then there is a alternate reality, and there is a world of lies. So I'm not, sitting here and comparing apples and oranges is almost kind of, I don't think we're ever going to get back to a point where we can all say, these are the trusted news journalists in our lifetime. What we have to focus on is shift a little bit to more responsible consumers of journalism, more responsible people who will say, I know what this is based on. I know this is not true. I know this is a complete lie. I know that the election was not stolen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's okay to have questions, but it's not okay to undermine this system because you believe in a lie that is willing to make you go and overthrow our constitutional process because you read something on the dark web.
But it's a lie that killed Roseanne Boyland. I mean,
exactly.
And by the way,
it's affecting millions of people in this country. And I think that we ignore it at our own risk. You know, if we don't take it seriously, and I know that we can, you know, kind of dismiss and say, oh, JFK Jr. is coming back, and we all chuckle and laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
But, you know, Roseanne believed that Wayfair, which is the shopping company online to buy furniture, was trafficking children in boxes across state lines using, and that's what Wayfair was. I mean, it's bonkers, but she believed it. And her family was like, you know, should we confront her about it? Should we not? And they kind of chuckled a little bit. I don't want to say chuckled, but they definitely didn't. They didn't want to confront her about it, thinking that it may alienate her or isolate her. But here we are. The reality is not doing something about it, unfortunately, also led her to go down that rabbit hole further and further.
Yeah. Now, Travis can tell you I've had a problem with the Wayfair wife in the commercial for a long time. I think she's kind of an emasculating bitch, but it's a long ways from that to that she's trafficking. Okay. I mean, it's just so. But Roseanne's death. I wanted to ask you about this quickly. Speaking of, you know, people having two views, right? I know you said some of the other rioter you talked to thought the police killed her. The D.C. Examiner's office said her death was acute amphetamine intoxication. Was that ever resolved, or what happened with that?
So it's not specifically been resolved in the context of did the police kill her? And we tried to make this very clear in the podcast. This is what a lot of people in the right-wing space have been saying, right? Because their narrative about January the 6th, and you talk about how lies get born. Well, we are watching a real-time lie being born around January the 6th. You start hearing people refer to those that were there on January the 6th as patriots, that they were just simply there peacefully protesting. It was the police that attacked them. They were there to exercise their First Amendment rights. So now you're seeing in real time how this new lie around Roseanne is starting to come to light, which is the belief that Roseanne was killed by the police. Now, the truth is, the family wants to figure out, and the family's been very clear, they don't believe the police killed her. But they want to figure out what the last 5 minutes of her life were and whether there are unanswered questions about, was she trampled to death? Did something that was in the air contribute to her death? Like, was she sprayed with something?
Yeah.
So all of those are legitimate questions that I think a family that wants to have closure about the death of their daughter have. But that's not what's happening. What you're seeing in the right wing, Steve Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, they're taking this and they're running away with it to say the police killed her, the police beat her, the police did. And right now, there is no video evidence to suggest that.
Just quickly before you go, with all these bombshells on January 6th, because Roseanne was one of the foot soldiers, what do you think is the most significant thing that's happened just in these last 24 hours in terms of January 6th?
I mean, for me, I think ultimately, you know, the fact that we have an investigation trying to figure out how high this went up the food chain and it's being stonewalled by everyone, I think that is very concerning. And nobody is willing to cooperate of substance. I mean, there people are cooperating, but you're not getting the people that were close to the decision-making power. And I think, you know, one of the frustrating things, just to kind of button it up with what Roseanne's family was asking for, and specifically Justin here, he was saying that the 25th Amendment should be invoked to remove Trump from office because he believes that Trump was responsible for inciting the crowd that led to Roseanne's death. And I think for all of us who've been watching this year unfold, it's hard to imagine that January the 6th would have happened without one person, Donald Trump.
Yep.
Nobody else. These people were there. People believed in the lie. People supported the lie. But there was one person that called all those people to January the 6th to D.C. and then told them, march on to the rally. And it was Donald Trump. So I think that anyone who tries to block the committee from getting to the bottom of that relationship, of that connection, is doing a massive disservice to the democracy of this country. I'm not talking about to the politics. I'm not talking about one party or just simply information. If we don't have a solid understanding of what happened on January the 6th, we are ripe to repeat it in the future with somebody who could be more sinister than Donald Trump, way smarter than Donald Trump, not as bombastic, could be doing it behind the scenes. Listen, at the end of the day, you had 140 plus members of Congress who supported Donald Trump in overturning the election, or at least stopping the process. They were on the inside of Congress. Forget the people that were on the outside.
Right.
Yeah.
You already had 140 people on the inside. And I think that's extremely dangerous.
Yeah. Ayman, you are obviously way better at distilling all the news every day. Now that I have your cell phone number, I'm going to call you every day to get your help
I didn't give it to
in
Raymond.
putting the show together. Okay, Ayman, the podcast is is a must listen American Radical, and as is his show every weekend on MSNBC. It was such an honor to be on it, and please come back anytime.
Likewise, you do the same. We'll see you on the weekends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ayman. There he goes. Ayman Mohyeldin, MSNBC, American Radical. Get the podcast.
Awesome.